In this lecture, I'm going to talk about the peripheral nervous system. We'll look at some of the structures and functions of the PNS. You can see the diagram here. It shows the green network of nerves that travel through the body, make up the peripheral nervous system. In addition to these nerves, there are ganglia, which are bundles of neuronal cells found outside of the central nervous system. We will look more closely at those a little bit later. Remember that a nerve is just a bundle of neuron fibers. I talk a lot more about that in lecture 1 if you need a refresher. But a nerve is bundles of neurons held together with connective tissue. Those neurons may be carrying information towards the central nervous system or away from the central nervous system. Keep in mind, though, that a single neuron can only carry information in one direction. It's either going to always carry information towards the CNS or always carry information away. We can classify nerves based on the direction of the information that the neurons are carrying. So if all of the neurons in a single nerve are carrying information towards the central nervous system, then we would call that an afferent or a sensory nerve. Similarly, if all the neurons in the nerve are carrying information away from the central nervous system, it's going to be a motor nerve or an efferent nerve. The majority of nerves, though, have both. They have some efferent and some afferent neurons, and we would call those mixed nerves. There are 12 pairs of cranial nerves, and these are nerves that branch directly from the brain. Most of them are responsible for serving the face and the neck. They're numbered in order from front to back. So the olfactory nerve here is cranial nerve number 1. I do not expect you to memorize the numbers of all of the different nerves. Notice that many of them are mixed nerves. For example, we can see that this picture is representing motor neurons as red and sensory neurons as blue, and frequently there are both motor and sensory neurons traveling together in the nerve. There are a couple nerves that are sensory only. The first one here is the olfactory nerve. That's bringing information about smell into the brain. The optic nerve is also only sensory. That's bringing in information about vision. And then the vestibulocochlear nerve, that's bringing in information about two different things. Vestibulo means it's sort of dealing with the vestibular system, which is your balance and equilibrium. The best way to think about this is if you close your eyes, you are still able to tell which way is up, and you're still able to tell whether or not you're moving. So that is information that's being fed to your brain from your vestibular system. Information about position and motion. The cochlear region here is the organ that takes in information about sound. So it's sending information to your brain about sounds that it's picking up. Notice too that there is one nerve here that extends out beyond the head and neck. So all the rest of these nerves only serve the head and neck. The vagus nerve, though, extends down into the thoracic cavity where it serves the heart and lungs. It also extends even farther into the abdominal cavity and interacts with some of the digestive organs. We'll talk more about that a little bit later, but the vagus nerve is an important nerve. It plays an important role in our body's parasympathetic response. For now, I just want to say that the parasympathetic response involves a bunch of changes that happen in the body to prepare the body for rest. It's the opposite of the fight or flight response. And like I said, we'll get into this a little bit more later. 31 pairs of spinal nerves branch out from the spinal cord. Each of these nerves passes through a little gap between two vertebrae. So between every two vertebrae, there are a pair of nerves leaving the spinal cord. The nerves are numbered from top to bottom, and they are named for the region of the backbone that they originate in. So we're going to have cervical nerves, thoracic nerves, lumbar nerves, sacral nerves. Notice that the number of nerves is the same as the number of vertebrae. So remember, there were 8 cervical vertebrae, there are 8 cervical nerves, 12 thoracic vertebrae, 12 thoracic nerves, etc. The spinal nerves we looked briefly at in the last lecture. I want to just head on to the next picture and we'll see a cross section of the spinal cord. So here we have the spinal cord in cross section. We've got the white matter around the outside. We've got this butterfly-shaped gray matter in the middle. And we looked at this in our last lecture. We said that there was this dorsal root with the dorsal root ganglion and a ventral root. And when they merge, that is the spinal nerve right here. So the spinal nerve has information running in both directions. It's got both sensory and motor axons. We can see now that we're studying the peripheral nervous system that the spinal nerve branches as it heads away from the spinal cord. And it branches into two sections, the dorsal ramus, and a ramus is a generic term for an arm shape or a bar-shaped structure. We've also got the ventral ramus here. The dorsal ramus is smaller and less branched because it's basically just serving the muscles and skin of your back. If you think about where your spinal cord is in relative to your trunk, your spinal cord is at the dorsal side of your trunk, so there's not much behind it. The dorsal ramus serves everything on your back, though. The ventral ramus is much more highly branched, it is longer, and the nerves will network together to form something called a plexus. A plexus is a single sort of network of nerves that fuse together and then branch out. And the ventral ramus is going to serve everything that is ventral to your spinal cord. So there are organs in here, there are muscles, skin, bone, all serviced by the ventral rami. Outgoing or efferent signals traveling through the peripheral nervous system can be split into a somatic and an autonomic division. In the somatic nervous system, the efferent signals are sent to skeletal muscles. In other words, the effectors of the somatic nervous system are skeletal muscles. Remember that skeletal muscles are voluntary, so we sometimes refer to this as the voluntary nervous system. With the autonomic nervous system, the effectors are going to be involuntary tissues, things like cardiac and smooth muscle, as well as glands. The autonomic nervous system is further divided up into a sympathetic and a parasympathetic division. The sympathetic division is more commonly referred to as fight or flight. And basically, the body, with the fight or flight response, the body is making adjustments to divert energy and resources away from the digestive, urinary, and reproductive systems. And you're giving more energy to the cardiovascular and muscular system. So preparing the body to do one or the other, either fight or run away. Okay. The parasympathetic division of the autonomic nervous system will do the opposite. It will prepare your body for rest and digest. It's going to divert energy away from the muscles and towards the digestive and reproductive organs. This diagram illustrates the anatomical differences between the somatic and autonomic nervous systems. In the somatic, which is this top layer here, we can see that there's only one motor neuron involved in a response. So the somatic nervous system, the one motor neuron involved in the response is found in the central nervous system, and its axon extends all the way out to the effector, which is skeletal muscle. The neuron releases acetylcholine, and that is how it communicates with the muscle. This should look very familiar to you. We've already studied the muscular system, so you know how neurons and muscles interact with one another. The autonomic nervous system is going to have at least two motor neurons involved in the pathway. There's going to be a cell body that's found first in the central nervous system, and another cell body found somewhere outside of the central nervous system, frequently in an area called a ganglion. And a ganglion is a bundle of cells a bundle of neuronal cells found outside the central nervous system. You can think of it kind of like a little area of gray matter found somewhere in the body outside the CNS. Because this neuron comes before the ganglion, we're going to call this the preganglionic axon. And this axon here is postganglionic. It's coming after the ganglion. Our first motor neuron, its cell body is in the central nervous system, and it uses acetylcholine to signal the second motor neuron. That second motor neuron is going to then extend and signal the effectors. So the effectors, remember, for autonomic will either be smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, or glands. And the specific hormone or the specific neurotransmitter that's going to be used depends whether we're looking at the sympathetic division or the parasympathetic. The neurotransmitter released from these motor neurons will be epinephrine and norepinephrine. These are more commonly referred to as adrenaline and noradrenaline, and you should have kind of a previous understanding of what adrenaline does. You've heard about it before. It's going to be increasing energy levels and sort of getting you ready for that fight or flight response. The parasympathetic division is releasing acetylcholine at its effector organs, and that's going to be having the opposite effect. It's going to be having the calming effect. In this final slide, we look at the anatomy of the autonomic nervous system. We're going to start over here looking at the sympathetic nervous system. Notice this is going to be the response or sort of set of responses of the body whenever there's an unusual stimulus. So a little way to help you remember this is a bunch of things that start with E will cause your sympathetic nervous system to kick on. Exercise, excitement, emergency, embarrassment. Any of those things that make your heart beat faster, make you sweat, those are going to be the sympathetic nervous system kicking in. Notice that the motor neurons are all originating from the thoracic and lumbar regions of the spine. And in general, we're going to have an increase of activity in muscles and heart and lungs, and a decrease of activity in all of the types of organs that would be involved in digestion, reproduction, or excretion. Over here on the other side, we see the parasympathetic nervous system. This is the purple neurons, and it's going to be the opposite effect of the sympathetic nervous system. It's going to help the body conserve energy, and it's the D division. It's going to be involved with digestion, defecation, diuresis. The neurons, the motor neurons of the parasympathetic division are going to originate from two places. There are some cranial nerves, so there are some nerves originating from the brain. The eye is going to constrict, so the pupil will become smaller, letting in less light. The salivary glands will increase in activity, so they're going to help you. That's part of the beginning of the digestive system. The heart and lungs are going to slow down. The heart beats more slowly. The lungs, the capillaries in the lungs constrict so that you're not taking in as much oxygen. And then all of the digestive, reproductive, and urinary organs will increase their activity. One of these cranial nerves is the vagus nerve. It's the one that we see leaving the brain and heading down into the thoracic and the abdominal cavities. This is an extremely important nerve relating to the parasympathetic nervous system. Stimulation of the vagus nerve will help to turn on your parasympathetic response. One way to stimulate the vagus nerve is to take long, deep breaths, which is why sometimes deep breathing exercises are used to help people relax. When you breathe deeply, you stimulate your vagus nerve. That starts to switch your body over from the sympathetic to the parasympathetic response. All right, this wraps up your nervous system notes. I hope this was helpful.